Hi guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to another episode of Combat Chronicles. I'm here to do a very quick review of the Strickland versus Magomedov fight, which is going to happen tomorrow morning. Now this is a fight night event and these two are headlining the main card. This is a very interesting fight for the middleweight division and also for both fighters, so we'll be getting into the nitty-gritties of it. Before we do that though, I would like to mention that Magomedov has only had one fight in the UFC. So when I discuss the tactics, when I discuss the statistics that he presents, a lot of things are not going to be very accurate and they're not going to paint a very good picture of what he does or what he is good at. It might seem like a very exaggerated statistic sheet, so keep that in mind as you try and unravel this fight. So for starters, Sean Strickland, if you're a fight fan, you know Sean Strickland for sure. He is loud, bald, highly aggressive, talks a lot, and he's quite a popular fighter. He has been criticized by some analysts for having not a very aesthetically pleasing style, but I find him to be a very interesting fighter to watch, based purely on the fact that he takes the fight to his opponents. He doesn't really have a boring fight in him, according to me. Now, he has become the gatekeeper of the middleweight division because he has very good skills. He has an excellent skill set, but he has not been able to break into the upper echelons of the middleweight division. So he has 2 losses in the last 3 fights. So the third last fight was against Pereira, yes, and he lost that fight in fantastic fashion. Mind you, he got set up and got hit by a left hook by Alex Pereira, and as we all know, Pereira went on to fight for the middleweight title against Israel Adesanya. So even at that point, he was acting as a gatekeeper while trying to potentially be a contender. His next fight was against Jared Cannonier and he lost that fight as well, which got Jared Cannonier the title shot. And then his last fight was a win against Imavov, and that has put him back on the radar of the middleweight elite. Now this fight is important for both fighters because if Abus wins this fight, then he goes from being somebody who has only one fight in the UFC but a very good record outside of the UFC. He goes from being that outlier to becoming a genuine contender. If Sean Strickland wins this fight, then it puts him back on the map and he can then maybe win another fight and go for title contention once again. So it is a very important fight for both fighters in very different ways. Now, if you look at the style that these two fighters use to fight, there are major differences. Now, Sean Strickland is not really a grappler or a wrestler. He does not like to do that, but he does boast an 85% takedown defense, which is very good, and he will need those expertise against Abus, who happens to be from the Eastern Bloc. So he was born and brought up there in his earlier years, where he got a chance to wrestle and he became a very proficient wrestler. He then moved as a young child to Germany, where he could not wrestle as much because the competition level was a lot lower. So instead of that, he decided to strike. He started striking and learning how to strike. Now what that did was it made a very complete package. Abus is an excellent wrestler and an excellent striker. Strickland, on the other hand, is not very good in being the aggressor in wrestling exchanges, even though he has an 85% takedown defense. Now that is a good thing because he will have to use all of those 85% to keep Abus off of him if he decides to take him down. If you look at Abus, an interesting aspect of his fighting style is that he molds his strikes and the variety of his strikes into each other very, very well. So he will use a kick to set up strikes, punches, and then he will use punches to set up kicks. So not only does he get you to think about one aspect of a striking exchange and then surprise you with the other, he flows through kicks and punches very, very seamlessly. So there isn't really too much of a wind up, or he does not telegraph his strikes as much. So Strickland will have to be mindful of that, especially considering the fact that Strickland tries to close the range and get into the opponent's guard a lot. So yeah, he does not want to get caught by Abus the way he got caught by Alex Pereira, because that could end the fight badly for him. Now, Sean Strickland has a very unconventional striking style, which is striking is primarily his go-to method of fighting. So he has a very unconventional striking style because he spars a lot, which is not recommended for most people, but that has allowed Sean Strickland to be very comfortable in close range with opponents, because he is used to that, and also because he has a high floating guard with his hands. So he makes sure that he doesn't get hit by a lot of strikes by blocking them with that high floating guard, where he will block a strike away from his face and his upper torso. Now, having said that, he does get caught once in a while, which you would if you were in the pocket with an opponent, and he needs to avoid that, because Abus is very, very powerful, as he has shown in his one fight that lasted 19 seconds, I think. Now, if we stick to Sean and his fighting style, next thing that I would like to talk about is, well, we've discussed his floating guard. His style and the way he fights gives him the role of a disruptor. Now, a disruptor in a fight will be the person who is constantly overloading the opponent's system with feints and with strikes that are not necessarily meant to hurt you or catch you, but that are just meant to overload your sensory system. So it is easier to move back from feints and constantly keep bobbing and moving and keep your defenses up and react to everything in the first round. But if you have to keep doing that for, say, 2, maybe 3 rounds, then your system gets overloaded and your reaction time goes down. So Strickland is very good at that. He's very good at disrupting the opponent's rhythm to the point where their nervous system can't handle the stimuli anymore, and slowly it allows Strickland to put more damage on his opponent. Another aspect of Strickland is his excellent cardio. So Strickland is not going to get tired. That is a feature of his fighting that anybody who watches him would know. And while Abus will have the advantage in the first, probably the second round, if the fight goes past the second round, then then Strickland is going to put the pace on him. He's going to put a lot of pressure on Abus, and most likely in that scenario, the fight might go the distance and Strickland wins it. Abus will have to make sure that he ends the fight quickly, because he might not be able to go 5 rounds with Strickland. Maybe he can, I could be wrong, but what we know of him wouldn't suggest that between him and Strickland, he is the cardio monster. So he might not want to take Strickland on in a cardio game. He might want to knock him out or wrestle him and finish him quickly. Now, Strickland, because of his unorthodox style, like I said, does very, very well when he gets in close range with his opponents, because even if it seems like he's getting hit, he's often, like I said, blocking shots and not getting completely hit by them, and they just glance off or partially hit, and that allows him to stay in the pocket and constantly pepper his opponents with shots. So with Strickland, it is a very high stakes game of rock'em sock'em robots in a way. He's going to hit you, he's going to try his best to not let you hit him, but he's going to stay close to you. He's not going to disengage throughout most of the fight. If we move over to Abus, well, Abus is very good at a distance. And why is that important? If you if you look at the physicality of both fighters, there isn't much to separate them. So Strickland is 6'1", Abus is 6'2". Strickland has a 76-inch reach, Abus has a 78-inch reach. So he is an inch taller, he has 2 inches in reach, but Abus is not physically that much larger than Strickland is, especially when it comes to using your range. But the style that he employs of striking from a distance and using entries and exits very, very well to come into range, strike, maybe launch a combo and then come out of range, makes that 2-inch reach advantage very, very significant, because then it becomes like a 4 or a 5-inch reach advantage. Now that is going to be a very interesting conflict, because Abus will always want to keep the striking exchange in a manner where he gets to strike from a distance and enter and exit as he wants to, whereas Strickland will naturally want to pressure him and get into his range and stay in the pocket with him constantly. So it'll be interesting to see who gets to play their game and make the other person play that game as well. Now Abus, like I said, is an excellent wrestler. So Strickland would not want to go to the ground with him. He will want to stay up, which generally is what his tendencies are. And Strickland will also have to be careful of the fact that Abus might use a takedown attempt or a fake entry towards a takedown to get Strickland to bring his guard down and then get hit up top. So Abus might fake a takedown or even try a takedown and then come up very quickly with a strike, and Strickland might get caught with his hands down, kind of his pants down. So he will have to be mindful of that, especially if Abus starts taking him down successfully, because then Strickland will be worried about those takedowns and he will react more to them, leading his chin to be open more often. Yeah, and like I said before, if the fight is going to go Abus's way, he will have to end it in the first or the second round. If it goes beyond the second round, then most likely Strickland will start taking over the fight with his sheer volume and pressure. So Abus doesn't want this to go very long, and Strickland will want to drag it to the last minute, because he's most likely not going to get a knockout. He's not known for that. So yeah, Strickland improves with time, and Abus wants to cut the time short, basically. Then Abus needs to set up his kicks with his punches and his punches with his kicks, which is what he generally does, like I said. And he will have to give Strickland a lot of stimuli as well, just to keep him off his back. Otherwise, he will start employing his game on Abus. So yeah, he will have to be mindful of that. And then Sean Strickland has a very unconventional guard, like I said. Not just an unconventional fighting style, but his guard as well, because he keeps his hands up and at a distance from his face, and he tends to block away from his face and keep himself protected. Now he does all of that at a very close range, so while he is blocking, he is also countering constantly, and Abus will have to find some sort of a way to navigate that guard to set up strikes. So he will have to give Strickland something to look at before he strikes him. Maybe start with a leg kick, which takes Strickland's attention away, and then come up with a strike to the torso or the jaw. That is something that he will have to do. Make setups, basically. Kind of like what Alex Pereira did to Strickland, because that was the one chink in Strickland's armor that became very apparent in that fight. So against a striker who is very, very good, who is used to fighting with people with a high striking IQ and used to setting up his strikes, that is an option that Abus has, which Strickland will have to be mindful of. Okay, yeah. Now for this fight, something that Sean Strickland has to do is integrate his kicks and maybe one odd takedown if the situation calls for it, but mostly his kicks with his boxing, because Sean is a very boxing heavy style, and you cannot just do that with Imavov, because then he will just keep you at a distance and use his kicks and not let you enter his guard, which ultimately is what Sean Strickland wants to do. So he might have to add a few kicks just to keep the exchange even at a distance and allow things to progress to a point where he can enter Abus's guard. Now, we've already spoken of the physicality. Their ages are quite similar, and like I said, Abus has a very weird record. You cannot really rely on it much to tell you what the fight is going to be like, because he has one fight in the UFC which gives you whatever the stats are, and that fight lasted 19 seconds. So you can't reliably look at this and predict what Abus is capable of. Having said that, now we can talk about Strickland and understand what he has to be mindful of. So if you look at the strikes, particularly the striking defense, Strickland has a 63% striking defense, which is okay, but with somebody like Abus, who in his last fight ended it in 19 seconds, started it with a... So Abus fought Stoltzfus in his last fight, and he hit him with a front kick right down the middle, right down the pipe, and Stoltzfus got stunned, and then Abus just entered into an exchange with punches and finished him. Now he did that in 19 seconds. So you can understand that Strickland might want to make sure that he brings his defense rating higher than 63%, because you don't want to get hit by this guy. Maybe he should focus more on his defense, but it would be much more beneficial if Strickland just kept his distance a little more and didn't get up close as often. So that might help a lot. Now if you look at their grappling, so Abus has not grappled in the UFC, so all of his stats are 0%, 0%. Strickland, on the other hand, is not taking you down very often. So in a 15-minute span, so say 3 rounds, Strickland might take you down once, and that is if you're not a wrestling based fighter. His takedown accuracy is 64%, no great shakes. His takedown defense, like I said, is 85%, which he will have to put to good use to keep Abus off in case Abus tries to take him down. And Strickland is not a submission specialist. He has a 0.2% submission rate. So what this tells us is that Strickland has to keep the fight on the feet. He cannot go down with Abus, because even though Abus has no stats to speak of in the grappling department, we know that Abus is a better grappler than him, and most likely if they get into a grappling exchange, Abus will overpower him. He is also the more muscular guy. He is also an inch taller, slightly bigger. So Strickland does not want that weight on him either, because even though his cardio is excellent, he still might get tired if he has to spend 2 rounds under Abus, getting pressured by him, getting the breath pushed out of him, and then getting hit by shots possibly. So keep the fight on the feet if you're Sean Strickland. If you're Abus, keep the fight at a distance on the feet. If that is not working, if Strickland is trying to enter your range and managing to do so well without getting hit too often, take him down, pressure him, attack him there, try and keep the fight in the realm that Strickland is not comfortable in. What would my prediction be? I find it very hard to give you a clear-cut prediction, because they have very similar records. Even though Abus has only one fight in the UFC, he has a record of 25-4-1 compared to Strickland's 26-5-0. So they're basically neck and neck. I would say that if the fight ends in the first or second round, it will be because Abus got Strickland with something quite similar to what Pereira did to him. Abus sets up a strike, gets Strickland, knocks him out. If that does not happen, then I think second round onwards, so in the third, fourth and fifth round, Strickland will continue to mount the pressure on Abus. Abus will tire. He might not be used to 5-rounders in the UFC in any case. So he will tire, and he will absorb more strikes, take on more pressure, and then Strickland can power through it that way. So Strickland is going to win by decision. Most probably he will not get a knockout, because that's not what he manages to do. And Abus will win by a knockout in the first or the second round. Now you pick. If you're betting money, I'd say go with Abus. But it is hard to count Strickland out either. So yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know what your preferences are in this particular fight. Let me know what you think about the other fights on this card, and like, share, subscribe, comment. I'll see you next time.